Okay, just sit yourself onto your lift and come into a good cross-legged position. And just have a little wriggle about, just make sure that you're feeling evenly positioned. Just hold onto your knees and elevate the heart area upwards, drawing your shoulders down. Just look down at the floor, look at something that isn't moving. Just focusing on long, slow, deep, deliberate inhalations and exhalations. Just listening to the breath. And filling the lungs from the bottom to the top, emptying them from the top to the bottom. Filling the lungs from the bottom to the top, and emptying them from the top to the bottom. Bring your hands into Namaste. Press the palms firmly together and lengthen your armpits into your elbows. And with an exhalation, allow your eyes to gently close. Just continuing to fill the lungs from the bottom to the top, emptying them from the top to the bottom. With each inhalation, appreciate the energy that you consciously bring into the body. As long as there are no heart conditions or blood pressure issues that prevent you from holding your breath at the top of the in-breath, if those things aren't affecting you, then just hold the breath very briefly at the top of the inhalation. Just for a second or two, not overholding. With an out breath, draw your chin down to meet your chest. Lift your chest up to meet your chin. Just spend a moment to seek to acknowledge the positive energy that each breath brings in. Seeking to generate a genuine, heartfelt sense of gratitude for something or someone or somewhere. Hold on to that feeling of abundance in your heart area. And then release the backs of your hands down toward your knees, palms facing upwards. Just bring the tip of the index finger with the tip of the thumb. Just a gesture of wisdom and peacefulness that we can carry into our practice. Wisdom and bodily intelligence and peacefulness. And then gently raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open. And then hold onto your knees, lift up into the heart area, really attempting to drive the heart area up to the ceiling. Drawing your shoulders down away from your ears at the same time. So there's that juxtaposition of lift and groundedness. Take a deep inhalation and then gently turn to the left, to the right side, sorry. Drawing your abdomen across and your ribs and your shoulders, just listening to the breath. And then come back to the center, hold onto your knees. Lift up into the chest and then turn to the left. And then come back to the center, just come back onto your knees, just sit back on your heels for a moment, just let your legs just really respond to the pose of virasana. Just continuing to take deep inhalations, deep exhalations, just listening to the breath. Walk your hands behind you. Bring the palms of your hands flat into the floor, directly underneath your shoulders. And then lift from your wrists and up into the armpit region. So that the chest lifts and opens. Push your shins into the floor, turn your tailbone in, and then lift up. Drawing the head back if you can. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. You can stay sitting on the seat bones if it's too strong in your back, but for the most part this can be really freeing for your back. Just lift from the wrists up into the armpits. And then sit yourself back down on your heels. And then just observe the energy the pose has released. Come onto all fours. Have your hands as wide apart as the mat. Turn your toes under. And then come up into dog down. Just feeling how your body responds to the pose this morning. Maintain the breath. Maintaining the in-breath, filling the lungs from the bottom to the top. Maintaining the out-breath. Listen to the sound of the breath as it enters and as it exits. Activate the legs right up to the top of the thigh. Push the fronts of the knees through to the backs of the knees. Turn the fronts of the thighs inwards. Draw the belly button towards the spine, support of the lumbar. Just mentally scan the body for areas of dullness or areas of unevenness of action and seek to address them. If I'm holding you in the pose for too long, then of course you can rest, come down into Adho Mukha Virasana, or just bend your knees. Just take a few breathers. If you can stay and maintain, then do. Activating the legs really precisely. Set your feet forwards, come up into a standing position, and then just bring your feet as wide apart as your mat. And let's use the blocks for half uttanasana. So have your feet as wide apart as the mat with the toes turning inwards a little. Hinge at the hips, come forwards, hinging at the hips, find the blocks underneath your shoulders. Stay on fingertips. Activate the legs like you're still doing dog down. Identify the evenness of action and attempt to address it if there's unevenness. If you can go down lower, then do, but don't be afraid of staying higher. So there's no such thing as being too high up in that pose. You just have to be as high up as you need to be. I was teaching a class yesterday, and one of the people were coming down to the floor, but then they were bending their knees and rounding their back, and I was like, well, just let's bring the blocks higher. And they said to me, well, that feels too high. It's like, well, there's no such thing really. You just have to accommodate the pose. So I think they considered it to be kind of like a mark of progress that they could come down lower. But that's not really a mark of progress, because pose was regressing. So we work in union with the body and the ego. So we try and avoid being in a rush to move deeper into the pose than the body is prepared to do or ready to do. Just bring your hands into your hips, come up into standing position, and then come into tadasana. Just feel how the body responds to each pose. Just observing the energy you release through each individual pose. Observe how you can bring the breath into both lungs evenly if you concentrate on it. You can let the air come out of both lungs evenly if you allow yourself to concentrate on it. So just observe and enjoy the moment of just being in tadasana and observing the breath. There's never any rush in yoga. We just work to indulge in the physical sensations and the breath. Bring your arms out nice and wide in towards your chest, and then step, jump the feet apart nice and wide. Turn your left toes in, your right leg and foot all the way out, just being mindful of the foot alignment, just lining this heel up with the instep of the back foot. And then just observe your balance. Are you allowing yourself to collapse into that right leg? Can you keep the hips level at first anyway, and then just feel that there's even distribution between the two legs? Stretch the arms out, come to face the front, and then reach over, trying not to lose that back leg. Working that back leg specifically so that you're distributing your weight between the two feet. If that back leg works, then the spine extends. If it doesn't work, then the spine becomes dull. Look up if you can. Breathing in and out through the nose. So this position especially clears out blocked sinuses. Way better than nasal spray, isn't it? Come back to the centre, swap your feet around, turn the right toes in, the left leg and foot all the way out, just being mindful of the foot position and the leg activation, especially with that back leg. And then come over and find the shin. Looking up if you can, just being mindful of the body in 3 dimensions. Lifting the chest, drawing that front leg buttock bone in a little, turning the front of the thighs outwards. And then coming back to the centre, bring feet parallel. And then step or jump the feet back together. Just come back into tadasana. Just observing the energy you've released so far. That lightness of energy emerging through your practice. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, listening to the breath. Just take in the belt, bring the belt over the right hand, up the right shoulder, gomukhsasana, and then stretch the left hand away, turn the palm all the way out, and then reach behind you, trying to rotate the upper arm in the socket as you go, and then assist the arm up towards your neck, and then reach up with the right hand. Bend the elbow, but keep the elbow high, and then see, can you take hold of the belt? If you can't, then you can just hold on to if you take hold of the fingers or hold on to the belt. So whichever you can do. So take hold of the hands or the belt, and then have a tug of war between the two hands. Putting the bottom elbow to the floor, the top elbow to the ceiling. Really good shoulder opener. Broaden the chest with the inhalation. Allow the chest to expand. After you've been there for a little while, just see if you can creep the hands a little closer together. Just reset your tadasana in the legs, in the spine. Just walking the hands ever closer together. And then release the top arm. And then gently release the bottom arm. And then stretch the arms down. Just again be conscious of the energy that you have released through your practice so far. Just hook the belt over the left shoulder. Stretch the right arm away, turn the palm all the way out, and then as you reach, try and really rotate in the upper arm. That's the real key to getting higher up with that hand behind the back. And then reach up, reach out of the previous pose. And then reach down. So as you can see on this side, this is my stiffer side. So I start off sometimes, this morning being one of those times, with the belt. So it's just a case of observing what we need rather than what we want. Just breathe into the pose, just observing the openness of the chest, and then just a little bit at a time, just creep those hands closer together. Breathing into the open chest, bringing in deep energy. So maybe after you've been there for a little while with the belt, maybe then, as you can see, a bit closer with my fingers. So just a little bit at a time, we just work into the pose. If you just stay with the belt, that's absolutely fine as well. Just opening the chest, pulling the elbows away from each other, the bottom elbow to the floor, the top elbow to the shoulder, to the ceiling, sorry. Just keep creeping the hands ever closer together. Just feel that your tadasana is even, you're not leaning to one side. Work that out from the feet. And then gently release. And then come into tadasana, just opening the chest, turn the palms all the way out so that the collarbone remains broad. Feel the lungs. Just deep inhalations and exhalations. And then gently release. Just come down onto your back and have a bolster. If you haven't got a bolster, you can just use some cushions. Have a bolster for your back. So you can come into supta, baddha, konasana. So you might want a blanket, a folded blanket for your head to stop your head from rolling back. And then come down into supta, baddha, konasana. And then guide yourself down onto the bolster. So we've done lots of work there to keep the chest broad and open, which is what the bolster does as well. It broadens the chest. So observe the chest, observe the openness of the collarbones, of the ability to broaden the chest even more with each inhalation. Allow the breath to be free moving. Allow the breath to be non-resistant. Because resistant breath is inefficient. Non-resistance allows energy to permeate through the lungs. Resistant lungs don't absorb the same amount of energy. So keep the chest open. We're using the bolster, that's why we're using the bolster, to keep the chest open. But emotionally, keep the chest open. Keep the chest open and responsive to the breath. Just observe the breath. Observe the sound of the breath. Acknowledging how the sound of the in-breath differs to the sound of the out-breath. Breathe from the bottom of the lungs to the top of the lungs. Breathing evenly into both lungs. Breathing from the top of the lungs to the bottom, emptying the lungs from the top to the bottom. Emptying the lungs evenly. Observe as you inhale how the intercostal muscles between the ribs expand, and as you exhale how they just bring the ribs back into shape. Close your eyes if you haven't done already, and just become observational to the breath. I'm not sure that's the right use of the verb, but just observe the breath. Can you become observational? I don't know. Just observe the breath. Become receptive to the breath. Just observing the chest's expansion with the in-breath and its natural contraction with the out-breath. So the first stage of ujjayi pranayama is becoming observant and receptive to the breath. Just aiming to inhale evenly into both lungs and evenly out of both lungs. Just push your elbows into the floor and then just bring yourself up into cross legs. Just come into cross legs. Just hold onto your knees. Just listen to the breath. Observe your energy. Observe the energy of the head, of the shoulders and the chest. Observe how perhaps your energy has changed. Lift up into the chest and then gently turn to the right side. Just observing your body's response to the pose. Digging the back hand firmly into the floor so that you stay on the front edge of the seat bones. And then come back to the centre. Hold onto your knees in the centre. Lift up into the chest, rolling onto the front edge of the seat bones. Sit on something if you can't. And then turn to the left. Just drawing your abdomen across. Observing the breath, observing how perhaps the breath feels different, more deep, more calm. Maybe as you turn, you observe that it's more difficult to breathe evenly into both lungs. So just bring the elbows apart so that you don't restrict the breath. And then come back to the centre. So we're going to go into supta virasana. Now supta virasana I know isn't always the most popular of poses. We're going to stay with the bolster, but you might want to bring your bolster up a little bit, make it a bit higher to make it kind of more stable. So if you can use two bolsters, or if you only have one bolster, then you can put a layer of blocks underneath the bolster just to make it a bit higher up. So that just gives you a little bit more comfort. You can put 2 layers of blocks underneath if you prefer, or you could even put them into a little ramp. So you've got one block up like that, the other like this, and then you have the bolster on a ramp. That is actually pretty nice, like that. So you can have the bolster on a ramp like this. It's really just anything that's going to keep the chest open and something that's kind of bearable to stay in, because supta virasana is a really nice pose, but you have to have the right level of equipment in order to trust it. If you've got problems with your knees, you can either put a blanket, folded blanket, you can put a folded blanket in the back of your knees like this. So the knees together, and then pull the blanket into the back of the knees, and then just sit back on that blanket. It keeps the knees together as well. So that's kind of a good, effective method if you've got uncomfortable knees and if you're uncertain of yourself in the pose. Otherwise, we're just going to go back into virasana. So the knees together, the feet apart. You're not sitting on the bolster at this stage. You're sitting between your feet. So your feet wide enough so that you can come down close to the floor. And then you just guide yourself down onto your elbows. It feels kind of unnatural initially, but you'll get used to it. And then a block or something, like a folded blanket underneath your head. You can feel a bit pinchy in the lumbar initially as well. So you have to pick up the seat bones. You have to lift the seat bones away and then encourage the buttock flesh to draw down towards your heels. Draw the abdomen consciously towards the spine. Let your arms rest out to the side. So find whatever you need. You might need to go a bit higher. So you might want the blocks underneath you. So just decide what you need. Actually, today that doesn't feel great in my back. I'm going to go higher. So sometimes you need more than other times, and it's just the trick is to recognize it. So once you are in supta virasana, if you really don't want to stay in supta virasana, just go back into supta baddha. I've just put the blocks underneath my bolster and my back feels a lot freer. Just go back to the breath. Just even normal breathing, just observing the breath. So stage 1 of ujjayi pranayama is to just observe the breath. Observe the sound of the breath. Observe the expansion of the chest with the in-breath. The relaxation of the chest with the out-breath. Differences in the sounds of the breath. Stage 2 ujjayi pranayama is where we continue to take normal inhalations, but long, slow, deep, steady exhalations until the lungs are empty. Followed by normal inhalations and long, slow, deep and steady exhalations until the lungs are empty. So you'll know that the lungs are empty because the sound of the breath will stop. So whenever you're ready, just normal breaths, normal out breath, a normal in breath, and a slow, deep, steady exhalation until the lungs are empty. So you can do intermittent breaths, intermittent ujjayi breaths, or you can do continuous. Again, making the breath non-resistant. Allow the breath to be free. And then with free, non-resistant breath, you absorb more of the energy of each inhalation and exhalation. Placing emphasis on emptying the lungs and filling them naturally. Observing the rise and the fall of the chest with the in-breath and the out-breath. So normal in-breaths, slow, deep, steady out-breaths until the lungs are empty. Okay, bringing the breath back to a normal rhythm. Push your elbows or your hand into the floor. And then bring yourself up and out of supta virasana. So come onto all fours. And then just turn your toes under. And then gently, when you're ready, bring yourself up into dog down, just straightening out the legs, just bringing energy back into the legs. It can be a narrow dog down. And while we normally avoid bringing heels down readily, after supta virasana, just bringing the heels down onto the floor just helps to refresh the action of the legs. So just use your dog down to recover. When your legs have recovered, just come back into cross legs. Just hold onto the knees. Observe the energy. Observe how this practice really manages to clear the brain fog of tiredness. Brings energy into the head. Just gently turn to the right side. And then come back to the center and turn to the left. And then gently come back to the center. Just bring the bolster just down to its kind of natural level. Have the blanket for underneath your head. And then we're just going to go into the heart pose, which is just still lifted in the chest, but this time we're just going to straighten our legs out. Just in kind of a elevated sirvasana style. Just make sure that your back feels okay. If it feels too strong in your back, you can always sit on a block or on a folded blanket just to soften the lumbar, and then let the body release into the floor. You can always cover your feet if you feel like they might get cold. And just come back down onto your bolster and then back to the breath, just observing the breath. The third stage of ujjayi pranayama is to focus on normal out breaths and slow, deep, steady in breaths until the lungs are full. So you breathe evenly into both lungs from the bottom to the top, and you inhale until the sound of the breath stops, at which time the lungs will be full, and then normal out breaths. So maybe you find that your normal out breath is a little longer than usual, or just not. Just observe normal out breaths. So whenever you're ready, just take a normal out breath, and then a slow, deep, steady inhalation until the lungs are full, filling the lungs from the bottom to the top. Breathing in until the sound of the breath stops, and then a normal out breath, and then cycles of that breathing. Breathing evenly into both lungs, evenly out of both lungs. So breathing in until the sound of the breath stops. Normal out breaths. And then bringing your breath back to a normal rhythm. Just pushing your elbows into the floor, just bringing yourself up. Just one more time back into cross legs. Just observe the energy of the chest and the head, and the arms and the legs. folded blanket for underneath your head. Have a bolster for underneath your knees. And then just a bit chilly, cover yourself up. And then just come down into sirvasana. So the bolster underneath the knees just softens the lumbar considerably. Just allow the body to release into the floor. Just normal breathing. Just normal receptive breath. Just listen to the sound of the breath. Just be receptive to the movements of the breath. But no longer elongating the breath, just letting the breath be natural. Okay, when you're ready to disturb yourself, just wriggle your toes, wriggle your fingers. Just bring yourself back into this pose of svanasana. And then bend your knees, bring your feet onto the bolster, have your knees together. And then draw your knees in towards your chest. Just have a little rock from side to side, from top to bottom. Just a gentle massage on the spine. And then very gently roll over onto your right side. Just stay down for a breath or two. And then straighten out the top leg. Just come up into a seated position, just a final cross legs with your hands in a masti, just a final spinal lift. Draw your breath in through your nose and down into the abdomen. Samanic breath, making it clear where your energy is. Gently draw your chin down to meet your chest. Just acknowledge the positive energy you have created inside through the extensions, through the breath work and the pranayama. Just acknowledge the positive energy around the heart area. And then send some of that positive energy out into the world. And then very gently release the backs of your hands down towards your knees, palms facing upwards. And as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open and the focus to softly come back. Thank you very much. Thank you. So hopefully you feel as though you've lifted your energy considerably and perhaps just allowed yourself to release from some of that brain fog of tiredness. So thank you very much for joining me.